She opened the door just enough to let the guilt slip through, but not wide enough for my kids to see the tree behind her, or the 20 pairs of shoes by the hallway bench. "We're keeping it quiet this year," she whispered. Then she shut it. I stood there on her porch holding a foil-wrapped casserole and a gift basket labeled "From all of us." My son clutched his drawing for Grandma. My daughter's curls were already frosted with snowflakes. No one said a word. We turned around. "My name is Rachel Moore. And from wherever you're watching this, tell me in the comments, stay with me. Have you ever been treated like a ghost in a family you used to carry?" We drove home in silence. I watched my rearview mirror as the wreath on her door shrank in the distance. Fake pine, fake cheer, fake sister. By 7 p.m. my phone was vibrating nonstop. First it was her, the mom, then even her husband. But I didn't answer. Because I was busy watching the same group chat I'd been kicked out of last month. The one I'd quietly regained access to through a very simple trick. The same group chat where my sister typed, "Let's not invite Rachel this year. The whole single mom thing is just depressing. I want Christmas to feel joyful. Plus, she always brings that weird casserole again. Oh, maybe we do a tight circle brunch? Just us and the fun ones." She didn't know I had every screenshot. She didn't know I'd sent them, anonymously, to her boss that morning under the subject, "How your senior project manager talks about her own sister with cancer recovery clients." She didn't know that her 8 a.m. meeting tomorrow was about to turn into her exit interview. But she would. Because I was done crying in parking lots. Done making excuses for people who left the porch light off and called it boundaries. Done being the depressing sister who once babysat her twins while recovering from chemo herself. She wanted to keep Christmas quiet? Fine. But she was about to hear the silence of her own career collapsing under the weight of her cruelty. And this time I'd be the one shutting the door. Even ghosts have their day. The next morning I didn't even have to check my phone. I knew it had begun. By 9:17 a.m., my sister's name flashed across the screen 5 times in a row. By 9:19 it was her husband, the mom. Then a number I didn't recognize. Probably her boss trying to do damage control. But I wasn't answering. I was making pancakes for my kids. My daughter asked if we were going back to Aunt Melissa's today. I told her no. She didn't ask why. She just nodded and said, "Good. It smelled like mean perfume anyway." You ever had a child put words to your pain before you could? I went to my laptop and reread the screenshots. The laughing emojis. The part where she said, "Rachel's always making her struggle everyone's problem." As if my years of clawing through chemo and 2 jobs was just an inconvenience to her brunch plans. She didn't think I'd ever see those words. She didn't think I'd remember every birthday I still showed up for, broke and exhausted with a wrapped gift and a tired smile. Or how I was the one who helped her land that corporate role in the first place. Polished her resume, even rehearsed the mock interview while my 4 was dripping at the clinic. No one claps for your generosity while you're still suffering. But they sure beg when the consequences land. At 10:32 a.m. she sent me a voice note. I didn't even open it. But I read the last text she sent before I blocked her. "Please Rach. Don't ruin me. I didn't mean it. I was just venting." Funny how venting looks a lot like betrayal when it's typed in black and white. That afternoon I picked up a shift at the bookstore. Didn't need the money. But it felt good to do something ordinary. To move forward while her world slid backward. And when I got home there was a card in my mailbox. No name. No return address. Inside a sticky note with one sentence. "You weren't supposed to see those messages." The penmanship was familiar. And I realized, this wasn't over. It was just beginning. Even shadows leave fingerprints. That night I couldn't sleep. Not because I was second-guessing what I'd done. But because that handwriting on the sticky note haunted me. It wasn't Melissa's. It was our mother's. I pulled out an old birthday card from a shoebox in my closet. Same slant. Same looping R's. Same signature hesitation before the capital T. She'd written it. My mother knew. Not just about the brunch, but about the messages. He was in that chat. She'd read them. And she said nothing. Have you ever realized your silence came from a legacy of silence? Growing up, I always thought Mom was the glue. Now I saw she was the varnish, covering the rot and calling it family. I thought of every time she said, "Don't make things awkward. Just let it go, Rachel." She didn't mean it that way. Turns out she didn't just excuse it. She endorsed it. Even now, while my sister's career hung by a thread, Mom's concern wasn't remorse. It was damage control. At noon the next day I saw her car pull up across my street. I didn't answer the knock. She slid a letter under the door. "Rachel, you've made your point. Melissa is devastated." He was crying in my arms. "I know she made a mistake, but family means forgiveness. Don't let your pain turn you into someone bitter. You're better than this." I read it twice. Not once did she say she was sorry. Not once did she acknowledge the harm done to me. Just more guilt, sugar-coated in guiltier ink. By 4 p.m. Melissa's LinkedIn had been updated. Her title was gone. Her employer removed her from the company website. I didn't leak the screenshots to the public. I didn't need to. The internal investigation was enough. And still, my phone lit up with messages from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Siding with her. Saying I'd gone too far. That revenge isn't the answer. But none of them were outside that door with me. None of them stood in the snow while their kids held gifts no one would open. They wanted silence. So I gave them screenshots. They wanted peace. So I gave them truth. And truth, I've learned, shatters quieter than glass, but cuts deeper than blood. The following Sunday my mother showed up at the bookstore. She didn't come in. She just stood by the window watching me shelve hardcovers like she didn't know what she was really holding in her own hands. A story she'd helped write page by ugly page. I ignored her. But when I walked out at closing, she stepped forward like nothing had changed. "You really think this makes you look strong?" she asked. Her tone wasn't angry. It was disappointed. That same quiet disappointment she used when I was 15 and forgot to clean the kitchen while throwing up from chemo for the first time. I locked eyes with her. "You stood there while she made me the punchline in front of the entire family." She was venting. Mom snapped. I smiled. And I listened. To every single word. She hesitated. Then said the most honest thing she ever had. "She's always been insecure around you." I swear it hit harder than any slap. It wasn't just about that brunch. It never was. Melissa's been trying to erase me since we were girls. If I got a scholarship, she called it a fluke. When I got sick, she called it attention-seeking. If I smiled too bright, she dimmed the room. And our mother just watched. Not because she didn't see, but because she didn't want to choose. So she chose silence. Again and again. And now she expected me to keep the cycle spinning. But I'm not my mother. That night I gathered every family photo from my shelves. Every birthday, every graduation, every forced smile memory. I put them in a box and drove them to a donation center. Let the past be someone else's nostalgia. When I got home, my kids were building a cardboard fireplace in the living room. They taped red construction paper flames above it and placed our only 2 stockings side by side. "We're doing our own Christmas," my daughter said, beaming. And just like that, in a paper fire and tiny hands, I felt something shift. I didn't need their table anymore. Because we were building our own hearth in our own house. And ashes, after all, make the richest soil. 2 days later I got a text from my old college roommate, Tanya. She worked in HR at Melissa's company. Read, "Hey, you didn't hear this from me, but the investigation found a pattern. Your sister's messages weren't a one-time thing. Screenshots helped. But turns out she'd been mocking other employees too. Especially women. Especially moms." My stomach tightened. What started as my personal heartbreak was now opening other people's wounds. Melissa hadn't just betrayed me. She had made a sport of belittling women balancing motherhood, illness, or just plain life. And no one had dared to call her out until now. A week after that, her department was restructured. Not only was Melissa fired, 2 of her friends from the group chat were let go too. Turns out, rot spreads fast when you start pulling floorboards. Meanwhile, I was getting anonymous thank you emails. "You saved me from quitting." I thought I was crazy. Now I know I wasn't. She made me cry in the break room more times than I can count. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt like I'd exhaled after holding my breath for years. But the backlash came too. An aunt called to say I'd ruined the family name. A cousin left a voicemail comparing me to those people who always air dirty laundry for attention. Funny how the people who want things quiet are always the loudest when exposed. So I posted something on my private Facebook. No names. Just truth. Being the bigger person has often meant swallowing shards so others can feel comfortable. This time I chose myself. Silence is not healing when it protects harm. 200 likes. 30 private messages. Women, men, strangers, old classmates. Truth resonates louder than shame. That evening I made hot cocoa with my kids. We sat under a blanket and watched the snow fall like it was sent just for us. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like an outsider in my own story. I was no longer the sister who begged for a seat. I was the woman who built a table where her children would never feel small. And the wind outside whispered something I hadn't heard in a long time. Peace. The day Melissa showed up at my house, it wasn't snowing. It was raining, that cold, spitting kind of rain that feels personal. She stood there on my porch, drenched, mascara running, holding a white box with trembling hands. "I just want to talk," she said. I didn't answer. She placed the box on the doormat and stepped back. It was Mom's idea. The quiet Christmas, the note, all of it. She said it was for the best, that you'd make a scene if we invited you. I didn't want. I opened the door. "Stop." She flinched. "I read the messages, Melissa. You didn't forget me. You mocked me, my kids, my cancer, my life." Her eyes filled instantly. I was angry. "You always make things look easy even when you're struggling." I felt like no matter what I did you still came out shining. "And that made you cruel?" I asked. "No," she whispered. "It made me small." There was the confession. Not of guilt but of envy. She looked past me into the warm light of my home. The cardboard fireplace still stood. The stockings hadn't fallen. She noticed. "You built something beautiful," she said almost to herself. I glanced at the box on the porch. "It's the present we bought for the kids," she said. "We kept it in the garage." I know. I swear I didn't know they were watching out the window that day. I didn't touch the box. "Why are you really here?" I asked. Her silence was all the answer I needed. Because her phone hadn't stopped ringing. Because the HR reports were public inside the company now. Because the world she built on whispers had collapsed in full voice. Because consequences don't feel fair to people used to avoiding them. I stepped forward. "You taught me something," I said. "That blood may be thicker than water, but silence is thinner than truth." She looked down. "Are you ever going to forgive me?" "Maybe," I said. "But you'll have to live long enough to earn it." Then I closed the door. That night I lit a single candle in the window. Not for her. For every woman who's ever stood on the porch of a family that shut her out. Because we don't need their house anymore. We are our own light. By January my phone had finally gone quiet. No more calls from Melissa. No more voicemails from Mom laced with guilt and passive rage. But something had shifted, not just outside but in me. I wasn't afraid of them anymore. Not of their judgment. Not of their silence. Not even of their absence. And just when I thought it was over, I got a letter. Not a text. Not an email. A handwritten letter from my mother. It smelled faintly like her rose lotion. Her cursive still flawless, even if her words weren't. "You've always been so independent. I didn't know how to love you without feeling replaced. Melissa needed me. You didn't. Maybe that's why I stayed quiet, because her weakness made me feel needed. Yours didn't." I sat there at the kitchen table, tears running hot down my cheeks. My daughter walked in. She saw the letter and instead of asking what it said, she reached up and placed her hand over mine. "Is it from someone who didn't know how to love you right?" she asked gently. I nodded. She whispered, "You love us right." And in that moment I realized. I'd broken the chain. Every generation in my family had one woman who carried the hurt and wore silence like a second skin. But not mine. Not anymore. I folded the letter and slid it into a drawer. Not to frame. Not to reread. Just to remind myself that even apologies stitched with pain don't always equal healing. Healing isn't a letter. It's a life rebuilt. That weekend I hosted a brunch. Just me, my kids, my 3 best friends and their little ones. There were waffles, mismatched mugs, glitter everywhere and joy so loud it danced through every room. No one whispered at the door. No one got turned away. We clinked glasses with orange juice and coffee and laughter. And I looked around and thought, this is what family feels like. Not forced. Not fragile. But chosen. And from across the room my son caught my eye and said, "Mom, we're not missing out." They are. He didn't mean just the gifts. He meant us. Spring came early that year. The snow melted in sheets, revealing the tulip bulbs my kids and I had planted back in October, before the cold came, before the letter, before the door had been shut in our faces. And one morning, while tying my daughter's shoelaces before school, she looked up and said, "Mom, do you think Aunt Melissa will ever be nice again?" I paused, fingers stilling on the knot. "I think some people confuse being nice with being unpunished." She nodded like she understood more than a child her age should. "Because that's what pain does. It makes poets of the quiet ones. It teaches us to see with memory instead of just eyes." Later that week I got another call. It was Melissa's former boss. Not the HR lady but the actual CEO. She'd heard about the screenshots. Not just mine. Others had come forward since. The company was overhauling leadership. And guess what? They were starting a mentorship program for working moms. She wanted me to help design it. Me. The invisible sister. The single mom with a sob story. I said yes. Not for revenge. But because sometimes when a door slams in your face, you don't knock again. You build a damn bridge over the house. The same day I signed the contract, my phone buzzed. Melissa again. A long text this time. No venom. Just 6 words. "I lost everything. You were right." I didn't reply. Not out of spite. But because the truth didn't need a second voice anymore. It had spoken. It had shouted. And it had reshaped the ground beneath all of us. My kids and I went to the park that evening. We brought the same board game we were supposed to play on Christmas. They beat me fair and square under the blush pink sky. And as we packed up to leave, my son looked at me and asked, "Are we ever going back to Aunt Melissa's house?" I smiled. "No, baby. We've already come home. Because forgiveness isn't a return. It's a release. And family isn't who opens the door. It's who never shuts it on you in the first place."